Coming into plateau lines amplitude through C's and link in excited interference and travels in direct lines of link. You have to come into modification ground centers, location at different levels of computers. Coming in that communication system, you have to truly understand how to use your lines of windows and frames of communication central and mainframe communication settings. What we have to understand is the line signals that we come in positions of: servers, providers, and messengers of God. So you guys are all messengers of God. But to understand yourself through God is you have to go through the wrath of God that you are. Okay, that comes in position locations in all cycles. That puts all communication settings before in position. Let's allocate time frame locations in that signals. Okay, the calm before the storm. That puts all lines how you come into your line communications and your cycles. Karma cycles, karma communication system, karma line direct signals, and line communications. How you see yourself through dogma, how you see yourself with dharma. What does that mean to you and trust it? Because it means everything different to everybody else. Get in that position locations to understand how to get into all levels of youth and modifications to your programs that you are through coding. We've been through this before, but that before is the balance of its energies and positional formations that operates as relays and correlations of existing. Before. So it's not before, is it? There's nothing before, there's nothing after until you understand its settings. And understanding that instructions is knowing how to change the binary, guys. How do you come into your algorithm if you don't understand the center of you? Is this center? Is this center? This is center right here. That's center. You stay in the center through box, through frame, through triangulation, or star, or circle, or number. You stay in the center. You don't leave. So to get in the position of your servers and providers and the messenger gods that you guys are trying to communicate through the system, you got to get you guys in 3 lines of cycles now. Right? Clocking settings. Process communication high direct signals. Now we modify the system lines of 0, 1, 1, 1. Sets communication equals lines of course centers, line position location of 0. Sets position location of 0, 0. Line communication high centers, 3 zeros and tractions. Indirects and modification grounds, in position line 1, 1, 1, and traveling communications. All right. All right, so the triangulation lines of 2 tractions and triangulation lines of flux over 1. Complicated stuff, right? Now, getting direct lines of high center interference, setting lines of positions. Remember the before? Travel point lines of graph. Before it becomes the beta. Set lines of alpha and center communication system and dark ages. Directing signals modification lines, course center line calculation setting. Beta communication lines of alpha. Alpha communication lines of delta. Delta communication lines of mega. Mega line position of zeta. Gamma lines of high center interference radiation graph communication setting to travel. Directing lines, course centers, flick the switch, overcross symbolism, line screen adaptation of the surface, and track locations. Directing core line communication and setting through all track location of travel. Directing in modification grounds, set calculation lines into flux lines and screen line adaptations of center of communications. Directing in communication high center interference equals lines of 1 equals lines of 2, process lines of 3, and track locations of walls. Directing lines to set position location of panels and track communications. Directing line course centers into 4 lines of setting, 6 lines of 8, 8 lines of 12, and 12 lines of 24, and track locations. Directing lines to high center interference in flux over screen, directing lines of pyramids and track location. Very complicated stuff, guys, through travel. Okay? All right. So clocking centers is a direct line position locations. Setting lines communication L, C, D. Living the cycles of dark. Right? Living lines of cycles, communication lines of high graph, line communication of dark over realms and track location. 3 lines of symbolisms, travels endpoint lines of graph, over lines of panels, and line rotation of surface and track locations. Setting communication high centers, window frames, and pixelation graphs on communications. What do we have in set position locations? 7 over lines in position over C over O. 7 track lines in direct signals and opposite direct signals and modifications. Change communication high center interference. What do we have in position? Pyramid activation. All right. Process calculation lines of window frames, L lines of tracks into all levels. Processing communication lines of high center interference travel. Directing signals, XT1001 in travel. Set position location XT2000 line communication lines of travel. And direct signals of mothership in lines of communication lines of travel. And set calculations. Directing in modification ground centers, clocked system lines of direct signals and laser line communications into all levels of CD, setting process lines and laser track communication lines and location grids, process line symbolism, cross location offline communication setting and measure, scales communication lines of high center interference, confirmation grounds, and direct signals and modification. Cool. Process lines of center, process lines of circle, process line division, X lines of factors over 3. Setting communication high set interference. So it's all communication system, how we go through a D line. See? A D line traction, right? So DX lines of 1, process lines of DX lines of 3, process lines of DX lines of 4, process lines of E factors over 1, L lines of C lines of A positions of B, and C over D over lines as communication ground centers, off the signals, off the grounds, off the communication centers, in track communication system, all through center of communication. Okay? Very complicated stuff, but it's a lot of fun. Now, getting that lines gets an all communication setting. Okay? All right, so get a lot more communications when we come to plateaus. Plateaus C's, direct lines of E's or factors over lines of D in traction. Okay? All right. Clocking symbolism is really understand how to use it through provision. Okay? Crossing lines of the 4-day line screen and direct signals across location system, all through tractions and direct signals of modification. Okay, laser grid lines, you stand on top of center, process communication lines and hide direct signals. Cross line calculation saying going through the portal, line direct signals and measure and scale. Okay, let's go to 45 line center and rotation surface and traction. Okay, walk in the opposite direct signals and flux over line and 3 lines of communication lines of pi, traction of sonar. Open signals in ground center lines of surface, location of pi, and generation lines of solar sail. Process lines of D and line rotation surface and tractions. Right? So it's a lot of fun when you get into higher lines of schematics over screen and track locations. See? You see it? You see that? See the eye line? Right? What is that? Lines of communication system. Higher levels of structure comes in androids, symbolism line track interference of cyborgs, transformers, higher lines of visual location of cycles, communication setting, but it's a higher lines of clock formation system and travel. Directing lines of servers, providing your system through messengers of gods, come into the wrath of God itself. That puts all communication setting how you see your sun in tunnel defense, in rotation grounds, in set position, right? Or you see an upline swing line communication surface, track correlation setting, colossal. Setting line is a triangulation of line communication setting to a vessel. Process communication ground center location to its crop circle and track location system in 3 track centers, a 3 clocking system of 0. Oh, they're not there. The energy's gone too fast. Is it there? Yes, it is. All right. 3 clocking centers of 0. Okay. Now, you have to truly understand what the test is based on. I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to use your crop circles as ground lines. It's a flux over line that puts all communication lines in measure and scale. Getting into that communication system, all through tractions. The elixir, cosmic flame, cosmic flyer, and track location. Good luck. All right. All right, so we symbolism that track lines, and look what we have in track location. Okay, ground shift lines of anomaly, core lines, center line position of 0 over tractions, 0 line division, 0 positions, and 0 a platform in line rotation surface and track location. Okay, now we cross the signals, tubing screen lines, adaptation lines of earth, line position of center communications, process its division location line centers into operation surface and track location. All right, what do we have in line screen adaptations? Processing and communication system through intelligence. Wow. Face, body, and set position. See? Look at that. It's amazing how you come into intelligence. Look at the face. Look at the shoulders. Look at the body. Look at the grounds, people. Intelligence. So it's amazing how we come into that all through formula and communication and setting, all through clocking system. All right? 4 lines of angles, 4 lines of symbolism, 4 lines of tractions, 4 lines of calculation, 4 set lines, high set interference, visual location lines, 0 positions of 1. Okay, 0 positions of 1. Clock assist lines that have calculus lines. 1 times 1 equals lines in position of 6 over line. 6 position lines of 1 over line cycles and triangulation. Complicated stuff, right? But it's a lot of fun when you understand how to multiply and add and subtract and divide. Getting in communication, high set interference, triangulation, flux, over cross location, screen lines, adaptations. Right? Directing lines, core centers in position of 4 lines, communication of pyramid and track location. Right? So again, the team is going to get more complicated with formula and equations. Okay, all right. Now we got a clocking lines of 0, clocking lines of 1, and clocking lines of 3, and clocking lines of 0, and point lines of graph, and symbolism lines of trifurcation lines of pi. Process communication ground centers communicate to the system all through grounds and communications. Center calculation lines of ground centers. Sets core lines of communications. What is this in track location of cycles? Sets communication lines of highest interference lines of C over lines over 4 or line position over 4 over lines of 0. Triangulation lines over 6 over lines and 2 angle point lines. Triangulation lines of flux. 6 over line, volume over vector, directing line signals, and process communication. Now that communicates high center for ground lines, open sequence through laser graph communications. Track-to communications. Directing core centers and position lines of calculation system, all through measure, all through scale, all through balance, and center communication. Directing core line centers of platforms, crossing line symbols. Process over cross location of symbolism lines of attractions. Process communication over line signals. Process communication lines of 0 and track location lines of measure. Scales communication highest interference. Set position of tuning. Line screen adaptations, all levels. Flux over 1, flux over 0. Sets core lines and 4-line track lines of 0 over 6. Divide lines of setting in position of center of communication lines of 3 triangulations. Process communication ground lines of surface and traction. Very powerful. Communicate the ground lines of surface and track location to its intelligence. See? Body line, process lines, and configuration system all through travel. Sets communication high centers. Body formation ground lines and communication lines high center location symbolism through androids. Dragging core lines of travel. All right. Now, I know it's complicated stuff, guys, but you have to really, really understand how to use it through platforms and communication lines of travel and direct signals, how to get into the skyline grids, your primer circuit, your primates, and set calculation lines of 0 gravity. All right, so set position location. Let's split lines of correlation and lines of triangulation again. Process lines and 3 lines of rotation, surface interactions. All right, so we set the set lines, set position of panels over 4 lines of signals and travel. Okay, setting direct signals and modification of 1 platform and center communication. All right, now we go through the torque fields, really understand how to get into the engineering skills and lines of communication lines of setting. Then we have the flick the switch and upline cross location system, all through calculations to its intelligence informations. There's the intelligence. All right. Back in sequence into platitude lines, sets course centers into a time shape, line direct signals of the timeline. Communicates lines of its timeline, rotation surface of time editing to an energy line screen adaptation of surface and tractions. Now directing lines of course centers puts all line rotation surface and line direct signals in modification grounds and crop circles in rotation system in track location of center. Okay, flick the switch again. We got a ground line communication system all through torical fields and travel. Look at how powerful that is. See? So get into configuration of face recognition, pattern recognition, time centers. That puts all communication how you come into that formation lines. Process lines, equal lines core. That sets lines in communication to its separation. That puts division locations all can modify intracation lines of platforms. Platform lines of A sets communication lines of high set interference. So you're constantly making mechanism lines of travels in point communication settings into set lines. Triangulation lines of flux, setting communication core lines and different lines of interpretation lines of travel and set calculations. 4 different lines of travel and center of seconds. Center of seconds, guys. Seen in a 4-line different angle. Okay, look at that. Look at that. Okay, and so look at this in settings. It's amazing when you come into that through all levels of formation of intelligence. See the intelligence? Look. There's the neckline. Okay, now the neckline is a 4-line provision line cycles that configurates its location of its face. Comes in timeline sequence, line condition system to alter attractions. So high is going to like this because it's all position lines of the calculation setting and all can modify in line direct signals in position location to a system through a praying mantis interaction. Praying mantis, guys. Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is. So we got a praying mantis, we got a cyborg, we got an android, and a similar location lines of 2 X lines in 1 cycle. Setting core lines of traction and divisions. Let's set the I lines. Here it is in set position. Intelligence. Praying mantis. Hooah. Ground centers, lines, shift lines, cross lines, communication, high center interference, position location to a system, all through tubing. Process communication lines and grounds. Open sequence, open communications. And set position. All right. Change the switch. Ground center lines a shift in position location of vast. Process communication high centers puts all communications center in center position, point centers in set position. All right. All right. Now we have to understand clocking. Understanding clocking is your Schumann resonance of graphs. So let's go through 13 measure. Let's go into this sort of 14. And let's go into 15 line subtractions. All right. All right, say one symbol is lines of 3 centers. Process lines of 3, right? 14 cross line roots the routers, lines of 4 track lines and 3 lines of angles. Okay. Directing lines of 5 lines. You guys have to travel through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols through laser now, because you're reaching the higher levels. 1 over pi. Okay, mothership. Okay, setting lines at back force communication, XT 3000. Okay, process going forward and direct and redirect signal. Process lines of 1, process lines of 2. Set calculation screen line, right? So you got a 13 line of measure times equals lines, 1 equals lines of high center interference, XT line screen adaptation of 13,000 settings, process lines of 3 cycles and 3 measures and set calculations. Directing lines of symbolism line course centers, XT line position locations, 14 lines of tracks, 14 lines of measure, and 14 line provisions and position locations. High centers puts lines of 1 signal, 4 tractions, and 4 communication settings of surface. Process lines of high center interference, 1 shift, cross lines in a 4-line provision, sets communication lines energetic dome screens, in flux over line, a screen adaptation of surface, and track location. Okay? Over cross location symbolism and line screen adaptations of solar waves. Communicate high center interference line track location to a system through all their central waves. Right? Process communication lines of mountains. Process communication high center lines of travel. Mountains. See? Mountaintops. All right, so we have XT1000 above signal and line rotation settings a measure. Scales communication high center interference. Ground center lines of symbolism 1-3 lines of tractions. Set core lines tractions, indirect signals into modification system of crop circles. Process lines over cross location system, direct and redirect signals into prophecies in screen adaptations into earth and rotation surface and track location system of your torical fields, a center calculation setting of clockings of 0. Very complicated stuff in set calculations. Right? All right, send communication high center interference, cloud line, screen line adaptations. There's the cloud. Symbolism line tracks, there's the earth and rotation surface. There's your earth, right? There's your cloud. All right, center communication grounds. Let's bring in the red symbolisms. Cross communication lines of color, overline sequence, 3 lines of travels, in flux over 1 over 3. All right, now we got symbolism line track centers now. Process communication grounds. Blue plasmas around the center source system in line rotation of solar generations. 3 track provision lines of cycles. All right. Now, directing lines of clocking sets lines of communication lines of center of traction. See how it changed the position? By itself. If you look really close, you can see the intelligence information at grounds. Right? Figuration of tone, directing lines of rhythm. Sets all communication system all through travel. In calculation screen lines adaptations. Process calculation lines of grounds. Powers and the atmospheres. All right, setting lines of communication high centers of flux over 1. Now get in the communication lines of grounds, platform setting, platforms 2, platforms 3, and tractions. All right, clocking symbolisms. Okay, we get in line specification LCD. That's a center operation, right? Lights and tractions, center core system, direction lines of high setting. Now we flick the switch in line communication setting, puts all communication lines of high center verification system, D lines of C over 7. Process calculation high center interference. That's where you have to modify the system locations. That comes into lines of core centers when you basically flip the switch and they have location direct and direct. Direct and direct and direct and redirect is understanding light over symbol, symbol over light, light over dark, and dark over light, a light over light, a light position over center over light. Setting lines of communication high center interference, lines of tractions, communication system, and D track location setting. Process lines of indications. Okay, guys? Okay, ground symbolism lines of 1, portal lines of screen. Sets lines into a half pipe and track location of 7 lines of measure. Oh, it's not there. See? The energy's too fast. Oh, I got to do it again so you can get in balance and travel. Is it there? Good. All right. Now we change the core centers of direct signals into modification of wind cycles and tractions. Directing lines, the energetic wave pattern correlates centers of tunnel line defense lines, such as screen line adaptation of surface and track correlates the system through L lines attraction, C line divisions, and direct line signals and modifications. Okay, ground center lines, high center, sets lines of center of communications to its operation. All right, symbolism lines attract centers in position location direct, redirect signals into modification lines of center, and communication ground centers of platforms and track location lines of measure and scale. Communicates high center interference location of travel. Center communicates the system through all levels of a black hole. Setting core lines calculates lines over cross location screen lines, adaptation lines of service that relines its system all through track location of travel. Setting ground lines communication high center interference puts all communication system all through track locations. All right. So it's important you understand how to modify your system and all through lines of communications. More difficult lines of drawing, the more it gets easier in the mind. The focus, the reality is the core lines, the servers, the providers, the messengers of God, the wrath of God, the communications of God, the center communication lines comes in the mind adaptation of calmness before the storm, right? So the storm is just basically putting you guys in position your karma cycles. Direct lines of signal, process this light, the high center interference of two tractions in the same direction. Center core lines into the opposite direct signals into modification ground lines of surface. Process line direct signals lines of E lines. Now that's E lines of factor. We got a D line C, X lines of 1 into E lines of 1 into factor over triangulation. Directing core lines calculation high center interference and flux over 1. Constant core lines earth line rotations into 3 lines of dials into 4 track provision lines of crop circle. Process communication, flick the switch, we get a ground service and track location. Okay. Directing lines of symbolism, lines of triangulation lines, XT1000 and 3 lines of panels and track locations. Directing lines of 1 over cross locations, directing lines of 2 and cross locations, sending lines of core line centers into mothership and travel communication. All right. All right. So you just got to get your grounds, your powers, and apps here. So the clock and location settings, Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth 3. Okay. Now center core centers, lines of inhibitations, and outline screen. Okay. Center communications over line screen. Direct lines, outline screen, adaptations, process lines. So we got inner spectrum, outer spectrum, inner center, outer center. Okay, that's how it's set up. All right. Clocking system lines of grounds, set position of dark, ecos lines of lights, right? DOL, right? Direct lines, operation lines of levels, eco lines, and position lines of ages. Now, ages, lines of screen adaptations, process lines of high center interference, in position location to its air. Living direct signals in lines of modification setting, in position lines travel. Point lines of correlation setting, docile core lines and documentation. Travel point lines of communications, right? Sets core lines, high center, location dark equals lines, equal lines of ages, and travel in point lines and in line rotation lines of air and track communication setting of times continuous and travel. Okay? As position of travel. Center communication lines, LC lines, set lines of D track communication lights and communication lines and direct signals. Modify the line screen adaptation of solar line screen adaptation of set position of solar sail. Setting communication ground lines overline sequence is above the signals in kaleidoscope communications of time measure. Okay, grounds, powers, atmospheres. All right. Dark ages, center communications over cross location. Right. All right, over provision lines of pi, underscore lines of sequence, position location of overdraft. Directing line screen adaptation system is treated as standard. Let's go 3 lines of measure, 1, 2, and 3 tractions, direct signals, right? Process cross line signals into 4 line communication setting calculations. All right, get XT1001 lines, we get XT1003 line, we get XT4 line set in position location to have an XT5000 line and XT7000 line tractions, direct signals. Modify the ground lines, communicates high centers, process lines of 1 over cross location of screen, directing lines of symbolism cross location lines of measure in a 3-track location of the system, process lines of XT1001 line signal, process lines of 3 line rotation surface into XT1 platform. That puts all communication grounds in line rotations as set calculation system as center communication. All right, so it sets calculation lines over sequence, comes into ground lines of shift lines of anomaly. Okay. All right, so it gets complicated when you go higher lines of frequency lines, getting that direct signals. That's why I wanted you guys to get into model identifications. Coming into distractions, what is this in symbolism? Just a simple lines of interpretation. What is that? What is it? What is it? That's the test. What is this? What is this? See, there's no communication of windows. See? You're focusing on windows. with expectation. You have to come into your own divisions of your own settings of your own imaginations. See, I got you again. Your test is not based on the windows. Your test is based on how you see windows. If you want to see windows or not see windows. Got you again. Getting in communication high interference. So this is an X-line slider. Now, an X-line slider has the lines of true track location lines, X lines provision, line communication lines of LED. The process lines of lights, lines of signal location setting to its existing location of its division. Process line communication, X lines of 1, X lines of 2, equals lines, X lines of 3, interaction. Okay? So, what is the test based on? Through your own setting, to your own symbolism, and how you see yourself through windows. See, the thing is, everything I give you is out of expectation. You've got to get out of expectation and start to see how you see things, because you are the creators of your creations, not co-creations. So, coming into all levels of creation is the creating of its own cycle that keeps you in a forced recognition of time's continuance. That puts all lines high interference, how you see yourself through servers, how you see yourself through providers, and how you see yourself through messengers of God that you are through wrath. Now, the wrath puts lines of width. Okay, the R is the remembering cycle. The A is the awareness, and the T is the travel, and the H is home. Okay, now you're always going to remember your cycles until you get out of no expectation, right? So the test is basically getting in that communication system, all levels of intelligence of you first. You got to get into modification lines. You got to get in correlates and high interference. You got to get in lines of communication system, how you see yourself in your own GODs and modifications, guys. Getting into the traffic inventory and line screen adaptations. Slow basic operations and speeding up, right? So you're going fast, right? So you're in control, right? So if you see something like this, what is it in traction, right? It's an open window. Platforms and core lines in one cycle, one traction, one division, and 3 cent calculations. So it has 3 graphs into measure of scale, communication, high centers of travel. Okay? So sentiment in screen lines and symbolism lines of communication and 3 lines of flux. Core lines of communication, high direct signals, and 3 lines of communication at high center locations of flux. Communication lines, energetic dome screens, location lines, and location grid, and security lines of measure and flux. And track locations. Now, again, you flick the switch. What do you have in track location to its setting? Okay. Know exactly when you're communicating with everything. Everything is in a 4-line signal. That's why you have north, east, west, and south. How to use the N, how to use the E, how to use the W, and how to use the S in your systems. Through current events of system, bandwidth, existing over networks. Process communication overline signals communicate your system all through travel, through your position location, your settings, all through your universal grounds, communication ground lines of service, modems, Wi-Fi, line calculations, satellites and towers, and the modification system to your planets and track lines to your satellites. Satellites, high center interference and lines attractions, indirect signals and location system, all through track locations. Setting lines, communication, high center, location and travel, and calculation. Your satellites. Grass centers and 4-line communication setting and travel. Right. So understand the currents and communication lines of high interference into precog. Predetermine process lines into platforms. Past, past, past. Right. Center core system times continuing at 3 track locations. Right. Balance lines of 1, balance lines of 3, balance lines of 4 in traction. Right. Process line, ground line, symbolism, location system, and travel. So you got platforms of B, platforms of C, and platforms of D. So you're constantly changing everything in traction. So your letters, numbers, change, symbols. You're not given the time of day in a continuous force that keeps this vibrational graph. There's no beginning, there's no end, just a continuous force of a force recognition and pattern-based recognitions that you have to understand through track location system. But you can't have anything of expectation through your test, through your evaluations, or anything in setting. Okay? Because it offlines your signals in set calculations. So getting in that position location system, you should already know the model. You should already know the identifications of what you're looking at in Skyline Grid, right? Because it's already been through your mind cycles. through the body in set positions. Now, this is understanding your provider, this is understanding your server, and this is understanding you, the wrath of God. Getting into the calm before the storm. Now, that puts all lines of all communication system all through travel. Okay, and set calculations. Directing lines of symbol location settings, specification by center interference. 3 lines of symbolisms. Okay, set position of 0, 0, 0, set position of 4 equals lines of 3 track locations. That's center. All right. All right. Process cross lines of 2 tractions and direct signals. Overcross symbolism lines of 3 lines of communication system. Set calculation lines. Ground centers overcross location lines and direct over lines. Directing symbolism, cross location setting of symbolism. Process lines of 0, 3 lines of signals, process lines of 1, process lines of 3, process lines of 6, process lines of 8, and process lines of 12. And track locations. All right. Now, if you look at it this way, what do you have in line rotation? It's primer and center communications, right? Okay. That's getting communication high center interference. What do we see in track location to a system? All through track locations. What do we see? Butterfly. The butterfly effect. How everything is connected to its own skyline grid, its own line system, and times continuance. Setting lines of primer, there's the primer. Okay, above the system to its set calculations. There's the butterfly and track locations. All right. Very powerful stuff, guys, through primer circuits interaction. All right, so line screen is a direct lines of panel. Now this process all lines of schematics over line. Now the primer line position location has 0 correlation lines, 3 lines of wires. That doesn't look like 1. When you bring it up really close, it's 3 wires. That's what you have to get out of. See through this and not through that. And once you understand the modification system, you see the primer circuits in a 4-track revision. Open that sequence, open the lines of communication setting, open through its window interactions and direct signals. Coming into all levels of communication system, all through track lines and high center interference of your pyramid and direct signals. The process communication on high centers lines of 4 traction lines, cross line signals in position of 4 lines measure, cross lines again in line communication setting and measure and scale. Communicate the high center interference, flux over line, puts all communication system all through platform interaction. Directing line symbolism. Clock the centers of 0 calculation system. All right, so you got 4 lines of zeros equals lines of 3 cycles. Okay, that's center, right? Ground center, line communication setting, offline rotations lines, underscore, and position of 4 zeros equals lines of 3 zeros in position. Okay, dark ages, center position. See the difference? Underscore, right? So, in that position line, high center interference, line travel, inline rotation cycles, I generation screen lines is 0, position of 1, 1, 1, calculation lines equals lines at set position of 1, 1, 2. Sets communication lines equals lines of 1, 1, 3. Sets communication lines of 1, 1, 4 interactions. Directing lines of high center interference. Setting communication lines of 144. Sets communication high center equals lines of 144. Sets communication lines above signal. Sets communication high direct signals. Modifications I am what I am and track location of the system. All through track location lines of provision and cycles and position of flux. Over line signals at LCD. Over line signals and track locations. Okay. Dark ages, center, upline signal, and set position of travel. Okay, that's how it's mapped out now through all lines of digital frame, digital clocking system, and travel, right? All right, 4 signals of 4 lines of signals and 4 ground lines of communications, right? Now, directing lines of set lines is a bracket in communication lines of surface. Track lines of 0 line rotation surface track locations. Setting communication lines of high center interference, energetic dome screen dictations. Now, what are we looking at travel and rotation service? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4 equals lines of 3, right? So that's a 7x line position location in the system. A 7x teleportation unit. Now that process is the location setting, how you cross the symbolisms, cross lines of communication center and surface in rotation setting and laser grids, power grids, central grids, main frames, track frames, center frames, correlations frames, and high communication to a system all through travel. Directing, calculate, and modify line direct signals in communication system into your settings and cubicle screen line and track locations. Right? Your spaceship. Right? Look. Your spaceship. Okay, guys? Center operation lines of service and 3 lines of cycles. Setting core lines, high center interference of center communication and direct signals. There it is, interactions. Hoo-ah! All right. All right, so understand the ground lines and signal location setting to upline swing. Cross line condition setting overline cross location of swing and track location of orbs. Direct core lines into probing in line score centers and configuration rotation surface in pi that puts all metric meters and scales into lines of communication system in your cubical screen lines adaptations of your clocking system and zero track location to its setting, all through its mapping sequence, set through pi. Okay. And that's center core system. What do we have in line rotation to its setting? Primary circuits and traction. Okay, very complicated stuff. But it's a lot of fun when you understand the metric meters and scales and balance communication to your settings. Process communicates to its level. All right, all through your clocking, all through your compass. All right, so we have to really, really understand how the clocking's set up now. All right. So again, it's to understand how to see lines of communication setting. This is line position downshift, that's dark gauges, all right? This is above the signal, that's center operation. Calculate and modify, this is above signal, and that's what it's in traction. Okay, so you live below, you're in the center, or you live above. Okay, that's how it's going to be set. 3 track provisions, 3 platforms. Okay, center core lines have nothing in track form in high center interference. Center communication and triangulation of the flux over line, indirect signals, upline high center interference, down cross-location system and travel. Points lines of setting in rotation surface and traction. Very complicated stuff, right? Teleportation lines is C over lines over V. Set communication high center interference at grounds over lines in position over A. Setting communication high center interference line direct signals and orbiting screen adaptations of flux over line as securing lines measure and set position locations to above signal and travel. Okay, dark, center, light. Okay, that's how it's set up now, right? In set position. All right. I know there's a lot going on that you have to really stand through symbolism, but I want you to understand how to get in the modification system, how you can get in modification centers all through a butterfly and track location system, all through plasma. All right, guys? Or how you come into communication high center interference, indirect signals and modification grounds in communication system, all through a praying mantis interactions. Okay, it's very powerful when you guys are coming into schematics. Higher laws of travels. So the test is not based on what you already know. The test is based on what you are in positions of times continuance, which is no expectations of everything that general says. See? Got you again. So you get into factors in high screen adaptation with cycles, which you should already know through its intelligence that's coming into your mission location, your grounds, your powers, and your atmospheres, your Wi-Fi's, your modems, your satellites, and your towers communications. Know exactly that comes into line screen adaptation with cycles. So you're in positions of what? If there's no windows, you put in the windows. Who's creating who here? Who's creating what? Who's creating the when, the where, the why, and the who is the how. Okay, getting into that provision lines of cycles, and we have a 3-track provision. Okay, what is that in symbolism locations? 3 tractions, 3 direct signals in the opposite direction. Cross-line symbolism line, 3-track location of a system, all through travel. Change communication grounds, center communication lines of center and track location. Above signal grounds, cross and line core lines at 3-track location. Crosses lines of calculation, screen lines, adaptation lines of service, and mesh location system, all through travel, and mecha location, another vessel and travel. Upside down, upside right, upside left, upside center, says communications. Ground center lines of 1, ground center lines of 2, and ground center lines of 3 in rotation surface and traction. All right. Change it again. Sets communication high center position. All right. And you got the mothership above and signal and rotation. All right, guys. So that's what it is in travel. And exactly what you're doing is calculation of screen and adaptation of system, all through flux. Boxing lines, triangulation lines, X lines of 1 or platitude line screen adaptation of service is processing you to higher lines of travel. Let's get a 23 measure and position lines of 12 cycles. Right? Now I decide what is 23. I decide what is 12. I decide what is equal. How to become my own programmer is what? Not through expectation of what's given to you. Is to have no expectation and know exactly what you're going to do through your formulas of your equations, of your own codings, of your own syntax, of your own design. And how you see fit, that puts all levels of you in communication to its setting through grounds. All right. Getting communication lines of two tractions, alpha line, delta. Okay. 3 lines of cycles, 3 lines of track centers, line position of 1 center, 1 traction. Setting symbolism lines of 3 over lines, cross this line, direct signals, and 1 xt1000 in travel. Okay. Calculate and modify and center communication lines of travel. Core line symbol location and downshift lines communication lines of travel. Open sequence lines into 2V lines of setting. See? Vector over lines, velocity over screen, X lines of 1, sets position lines of 1 lines of C, C lines of 2, 2 lines of 3. Sets communication line centers into 4 tractions, directing lines of symbolism and rotation surface in track location system, all through measure of scale calculation. Okay? It doesn't matter how you plot it to, but you can really see the power that you have in your universe of realms of communication. Right? Galaxy line, shift line, rotations and routers, line communication setting, interstellar mode, hybrid drive, center drive, flash drive, main drive, flash communication setting, high positions. Set lines of center, operation surface, and set position. Okay. Set lines of 1 in track locations. Set lines of 2 in track location system. Set lines of 3 in track location setting. So you're setting up volume, right, and mass. Sets communication, high center interference. In rotation surface, crop circles, and have 4 lines of communication crocking settings in correlation system and 4 track locations. Directing core centers line condition system puts all levels of calculation setting to travel. Setting direct lines calculation high interference at 3 lines of planets, indirect signals and modification grounds, and symbolism lines of tractions and set position. Set calculation lines and ground line 1 symbolism 1 lines, triangulation of flux over line over screen, adaptations over setting. Process lines of 2 tubings, process lines of pyramid activation lines of 4 line signals in rotation surface and track location. Okay, see that? Look how powerful that is. Look how powerful that is, guys. Look at that angle. You can see the volume. You can see the mass kind of traction. Right? Flat surface, volume. Flat surface, volume. Right? So you can see it come out, which is amazing. Right? Look at that. So you can actually see it come out, right? Not this. You never see anything like this. You see it in volume, right? Your clocking system has 4 lines of signals. Sets position lines of 1 system, 1 traction, 3 cycles. Clocking centers of 0, clocking centers of center, and clocking centers above. And that's where we're in divisions of. So you live the clocking lines of dark, you live in the clocking lines of 0 over center, and you live in the clocking lines above the signal. I am what I am, and set position lines of travels coming into that central system, all through track location and setting through calculations. All right. Change communication, high interference. What do we have in track locations? Right? What do we have in track locations? 8 lines of tractions, 2 panels, lines of 8 line rotations. Process lines of core center interference and line connection high settings. Process communication. So I'm indications what this is. Right? So I need you guys to follow your own path. So you can understand how to follow your own collagens. So you can understand how to follow your own binary, your transistors, your resistors, your panels, your operations, your light switches, your algorithms with no expectation of travel. Okay? So that's all it is in travel communications and direct signals modifications. All right, guys? All right. I'll see you guys in 5.